أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى عترة الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأجل فرجهم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. This is the third of our series on fiqh rulings of traveling, and today we're going to be looking at the journey. This is in order to honor Imam Ali Raza Islam, whose wiladat is coming up in a few days, inshallah, because he was forced to travel. So we're looking at the fiqh rulings of traveling. And today we're specifically looking at the journey, where we're looking at the distance of the journey, where the journey actually begins from, and the duration of the journey, and also the purpose behind the journey. So looking at the distance of the journey, we have said that the journey must be greater than 8 farsakh, which is 44 kilometers or 27.5 miles, and this is the round trip, so there and back. If it is greater than 8 farsakh, if it's greater than 27.5 miles, then I would pray qasr as soon as I hit Hadd al-Tarakus. Hadd al-Tarakus is the permitted limit, not the city limits. So the minute I hit Hadd al-Tarakus, then I would pray qasr, even though I have not reached the full destination. I've not reached the 14 miles outside of Hadd al-Tarakus. The limit from where I start praying qasr is Hadd al-Tarakus, as I said. But if I'm a traveler, if I'm actually staying somewhere, and say I stayed there for 10 days, then I would look at the limit being the doorway of the place that I'm living in, because as a traveler I don't know where the Hadd al-Tarakus of that city is, so therefore Aga says you take it from the doorway of where you are staying. So if I'm traveling and I'm staying somewhere which is not my hometown, then and I'm going to be traveling from there, I calculate it from the doorway of that place where I'm staying. But if I'm in my hometown, my own watan, then I would calculate it from Hadd al-Tarakus. So what is Hadd al-Tarakus? According to Aga, Hadd al-Tarakus is where you have traveled far enough that you cannot see the residents of the city, so you can't see any of the houses of the city, and the people in the city can no longer see you. Another explanation given for Hadd al-Tarakus is that where you have traveled far enough that you cannot hear the adhan if it is being recited in the city. That is very, very difficult to try to figure out where Hadd al-Tarakus is. Sayyid Milani has said, according to him, according to the fatwa of Sayyid Sistani, he says that it is the M25. So us living in London, and that includes Watford and Northwood and all of those areas as well, because they're all within the M25. The minute we come off the M25, when we're traveling away from London, the minute we come off the M25, then we can consider the M25 as our Hadd al-Tarakus, and we start calculating from there. And if it is 14 miles one way, then we're okay to pray qasr as soon as we've come off the M25. What is the watan? What is my original hometown? This does not necessarily have to be where I was born. It can also be, it doesn't actually have to be where my parents are living. My watan, my hometown, is where the people of the town do not consider me to be as a traveler. They consider me to be someone who is part of that town. So I can have more than one hometown. I can have as many hometowns as I want. And if I have had a hometown, then I may disregard that as my hometown if I've moved away from it long enough that now when I go back, the people of the city do not consider me as a person who lives in that city, and I don't consider myself as someone who lives in that city either. So those are the requirements for the watan. When I'm going on this journey, what if there are two roads to this journey? One is less than 28 miles and one is greater than 28 miles. It literally depends on which route I take. If I take the one that is greater, then I would pray qasr. If I take the one that is less, then I would pray full. So it doesn't matter, even though there may be two people who've gone to exactly the same place, because they've taken two different routes. One may be praying qasr and one may be praying full. So it really depends on the distance, not where the destination or the place that you're going to. If I'm going somewhere and I have traveled to this place and it is 28 miles or 8 farsakh or 44 kilometers round trip, and I've decided to stay in this place for 10 days, then as I said, if my intention is to stay there for 10 days, then I would pray full in that place. And if I have recited a 4 rakat salah under the intention that I'm staying there for 10 days, then even if I change my intention, I still have to pray full the whole time that I am in that place. And if my intention is not to stay 10 days, then I have up to 30 days, where as long as my intention is not to stay for 10 days, I would pray qasr, but the minute it hits 31, then I would be expected to pray full. Now, if my intention is to stay there for 10 days and I travel outside of the city, but I'm not traveling 8 farsakh away, then I would still, and I've not traveled long enough for me to be considered as a traveler. So let me give you a practical example here, which might help. So I have gone to Najaf and I do a ziyarat trip to Kufa. I want to visit Masjid Kufa, so I go there for a few hours and I come back. Now, because it's not long enough for me to have been considered as that I've actually left the city, although I have left the city, but because Kufa is not 4 farsakh away, and I've come back within a few hours, then I can still count me staying in Najaf for the 10 days. But if I decide to go to Karbala, which is more than 8 farsakh away, now I've actually left the city, but I've actually traveled more than 8 farsakh away, then that 10 day is broken, and therefore when I come back, I would have to pray qasr unless I'm planning to stay for another 10 days. So that's important to recognize. The traveling also must not be for unlawful purposes, which, for any sin. And there's 3 different things that come into this. So the actual purpose for the traveling must not be a sinful purpose. So, for example, it must not be for an illegal business transaction. So maybe, for example, to do with alcohol, or maybe an illegal affair, or, for gambling or something like that. The journey itself must not be unlawful. So, for example, if a wife does not have the permission of her husband to travel, and it is not a wajib reason for traveling, so for example, a hajj, which is wajib, and she does not need her husband's permission for that, but if she's just going somewhere and her husband has told her not to go, he's not given her permission, then that would be considered as an unlawful travel. Or, for example, if I am using money that is stolen money, or money that is not my money, which I've taken from someone, to buy the ticket for the traveling, then that would be considered as an unlawful traveling as well. Or the third reason is that I'm actually traveling to avoid some sort of obligatory action that is on me, obligatory duty that's on me. So, for example, paying a debt that I owe to someone. So for all these purposes, if I'm traveling for any of these purposes, whether it's an unlawful for a sinful purpose, or whether I do not have the permission to travel, or I've traveled with unlawful means, or the fact that I am traveling to avoid an obligatory duty on me, then I would not be allowed to pray qasr, and I would have to pray full. If I'm traveling to avoid fasting, although that is an obligatory duty on me, I am allowed to do that. So therefore, that doesn't come into this rule. So even though I may be traveling in order to avoid fasting in the month of in the month of Ramadan, I would still have to pray. I can still pray qasr. In fact, I would have to pray qasr. So it's important to recognize that it has to be an unlawful purpose, which is considered as a sin. I hope this has made it a little bit easier, inshallah. And tomorrow is our final talk, where we will be looking at the traveller themselves and what are the conditions of being considered as a traveller, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.